Hey everyone, this is Stildo33 that you would know me from the forums. I want to welcome you to the 1992 MyLeague tutorial video. You'll see a couple graphic enhancements pull up here as part of our work. So I really want to thank everyone that was involved in this project. Peaceman Knot, D4 3, McCasty. I don't know if I said his name right. Sorry, bro, if I did. He did a substantial amount of work on this, from attributes to tendencies to the Dornas to the stadiums. D4 3 did a lot with the cyber faces. So I'll pull up this roster, which you'll be able to download. It's just called 1992 MyLeague under my username, Stildo33. And then Peaceman Knot, he did a lot of the jerseys in courts, or actually did all the jerseys in courts. So when you pull up this roster, you'll be able to see right away all the features we've done. Two things you'll need to download to enhance your experience for sure is the Charles Barkley Cyberface, as well as the Reggie Miller. So I also want to thank everyone else from Operation Sports and some of the other YouTube users out there. I'll tag a couple of them in this post for their contributions. Cyber faces, let's kind of jump in there and start with that, because the big things that are in here is D4 3 was able to go through and edit pretty much everybody through the Denver Nuggets so far that is not included in the game. After that, I took over and did a lot of the editing, and guys, I'll be honest, I'm not good at this. This is not my area of expertise. So I went through a couple YouTube videos, was able to grab some guys that are already created, or I even used a couple of lookalike guys that are already out there. Over time, we'll go through an update from the Pacers through the Washington Bullets through the end of the roster, and update and correct things as we have time. But we just wanted to get this project done. Anyway, thanks for everyone that contributed to that. As you can see, Peaceman Knot, we've got retro uniforms. They are phenomenal. One of the big things, there will be some tweaking with this roster that comes. One of the big things that you'll kind of see right of the way, we're going through and we're just constantly going to update this as we have time. But I'll show you an example. We've got the retro Supersonics uniforms here. However, their socks default to be the blue socks. There's a few teams like this, which I realize is a little annoying and frustrating. We're going to go through and fix that. It's a little tedious, though, so bear with us on that. But for the most part, everything else looks really stinking good. Some of the other features we went through and added here, in addition to, you can go through, you can see the work of Mix shoes that are in here, which are phenomenal. It's a great touch to this roster. And then I'll show you how to set up MyLeague here in a second as well. But we've got custom shoes for everybody that's in there. Sorry, I was going to show you a couple of others in here, but we'll kind of skip those for now. As far as some of the touches that you're going to see, we went through and added some of the guys that come on board in the 93 season, the 92-93 season. So, for example, Richard Dumas, you can see, he was drafted in 2001, the second round. Well, he didn't play the 91-92 season because of substance abuse, so he set that season out. However, he did come on in that next season. So I went ahead and signed him a kind of a rookie contract, and then just made him injured for the first 10-12 months of the season. So, obviously you can go in your MyLeague and then make the trade for Barkley whenever you'd like as well. The other thing we added is Frank Johnson. I don't believe was on that the 91-92 team, but he did sign as a free agent, I think, in the offseason. So we went ahead and added him in, just to kind of give you a little bit of the feel for what that next season looks like. One of the things, like you'll see on the Spurs, for example, Vinny Del Negro was technically, he was playing in Europe that 91-92 season. I think he had a couple seasons there. But then he signed on for the 92-93 campaign and beyond because he was on that championship team. So we went ahead and set it up so those guys are kind of with those teams they should be. Same thing with Tony Kukoc and then Dino Raja that played for the Celtics. Those guys, I think, started, 93-94. So Kukoc, for example, is on there. We use the European contract, I'm not 100% sure how that works. What I have noticed when simulating through some my leagues is you have to have cap space to actually sign him, even though he's under contract. So I'll pull up Tony Kukoc here. Even though he's already under contract. So I'm not 100% sure how that works. So I'm going to continue to play around with that. So I had just signed him on here to have minimum cap space, but then he's basically a free agent in year 3, and then you have to sign him and have the cap space. Couple of things I'm not sure of. If you have bird rights, and let's say he's already got 3 years of bird rights to it, and you put previous contract in there as 4 years, could you just instantly re-sign him? I'm not sure. That's my guess on the workaround. The other workaround, and I think the easier one to do, is just make him injured for 2 years. The downside is when you injure a player, you've only got 480 days as a maximum that you could do. You can change it in Cheat Engine, but I didn't want to screw anything up as far as functionality of that, have MyLeague crash. So it might just be something you manually need to do year over year. So I left Magic Johnson on this roster, just gave him a virus since that's what forced him into retirement. So my plan for him is I'm just going to let him age naturally through the game and let his skills deteriorate over time. And then I'm just going to switch him to power forward at probably just the beginning of the 95-96 season. I know he came back middle of the year, but just to kind of have him out there, I think it'd be fun. Actually, what I'll probably do when I go play my league is I'm probably going to uninjure him and just have him play. I'm a huge Celtics fan. I love that Lakers-Celtics rivalry. I was pretty bummed that Magic had to retire. I didn't get to play that 91-92 season, even though we saw him on the Dream Team. So anyway, obviously it's your my league. You can play it however you want. A couple of big things you need to be aware of. Rookies, when you start a my league on this, even though I've gone through and we've changed these 91-92 rookies to 0 in years pro, when you start a my league, they will default and turn to 1 year, which really stinks. I've tried changing things in Cheat Engine, so have other people. If you have suggestions on how to fix that, please let us know. We'd love to fix that. So what I do on my league when I go and start is I just go start to my league, and then I go through and just use Cheat Engine because it's a little faster to just change the years pro to 0. If you don't know how to use Cheat Engine, you can certainly go through and just do it manually and change years pro to 0 yourself. And then your rookies will populate the season for Rookie of the Year, All NBA, Rookie First Team, Second Team, all that stuff, and they'll show up correctly. The other big thing you'll notice on this roster, and I don't know what the workaround is, I'm by no means good at Cheat Engine at all. So this is probably questions for Mick or D for 3, or there's a couple other guys I'll tag in this post. Ask one of those guys. They're way better at this. The Hornets uniforms default to just the modern day ones as well as the Warriors. So you'll need to go through and manually download those from the community inside of my league to get those to populate correctly, as well as the court. I don't know why. I don't have an answer for that one. If anyone has suggestions, please let me know. Would love your help. Otherwise, everyone else should work correctly. And as far as things that you'll need to download, there's a decent amount of stuff. You'll need to download and I'll put all this in the link, but you'll need to download uniforms, courts, from Pieceman Not, and there's one other thing that I'm blanking on at the moment, uniforms, the floors, and something else. I'm blanking on that one, sorry, but I'll post all that stuff. You'll need to download Reggie Miller and Charles Barkley. I do have a different Reggie Miller and Charles Barkley that we can download and put on the roster. If you don't want to mess with download, don't know how to use the cyberfaces, just let me know. And what I would suggest you do is just download a couple lookalikes in the community, and then those will be out there. I may go upload the Reggie Miller and Charles Barkley that I found that are decent. D for 3 actually made a 1992 Reggie Miller that you can use that comes with the roster, but his hair is not 100%. Overall, D did an amazing job with him. He looks really stinking good. So if you go back and look at Reggie Miller, he actually had hair back then. Most of us, even though I grew up watching him, I still remember him as just kind of being the shaven-headed, bald Reggie Miller. So I'm using that cyberface in my league because that's what I like. So anyway, you can go through and do that however you want. And then Mick's got several things you'll need to go through. and download as well, as far as Dornas, the stadiums, and then just some of the presentation stuff. So when you see what I'm talking about here, you'll see the little NBC Sports up here. You saw the picture of Michael Jordan when we popped up. So there's several things there. The other thing I would suggest you do, so when you set up MyLeague, again, always play this however you want to play it. Of course, I'm not here to tell you that. Play it however you want, man. When you go through and download this, so just the 1992 MyLeague, when you go through and set it up, you'll see the logos here, which is cool. You don't need to change anything. The thing I'll tell you here with Raptors, Grizzlies, and Pelicans, with those three teams, I filled out those rosters with some generic players kind of in their mid-high 60s, but signed them to long-term contracts. That way they're kind of a mediocre team. Those games are meant to be simulated for yourself. So like if you're trying to go through and play a long season, those will be treated as a simulate game. Or if you just want to go in and pound the computer, which sometimes I occasionally do just to pad stats, have at it. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, of course. So I've got my own kind of settings and preferences that I have, how I set up a MyLeague myself. One of the things I would suggest you do is for injuries is use those roster injuries to get a more authentic feel for how the game was, how that season started. And I'll give you an example because I'm a Celtics fan. When I pull up my Celtics season here, big challenge I have right away is a big point guard issue. So back in the 91-92 season, and there's a historical draft class, which I'll talk about in a minute. Mick edited and did a lot of this stuff, but I'll show you the big change that took place with that. What happened with the Celtics back then was there were Brian Shaw was they constantly had kind of a contract issues with him, which is why they eventually traded him to the Miami Heat for Sherman Douglas, who's on that Heat roster. I personally was just going to keep Brian Shaw. Obviously he turned into a much better player than Sherman Douglas ever did, I think, in my opinion. But like D. Brown started off that season hurt. So was Brian Shaw initially as well. So the Celtics were pretty thin at point guard starting off that season, which is why they ended up with John Bagley there for a couple seasons to kind of fill the gap till people came back. So anyway, that's why I would say start off your season with those injuries on, because then you'll have things like Magic Johnson is out, Richard Dumas is out, etc. However, if you rather would have those guys played, it's your MyLeague, set it up that way. Everybody's different how they do that. I haven't decided how I'm going to play MyLeague, other than I'm probably going to uninjure the guys that weren't on that roster, Vinny Del Negro, the Tony Kukoc, Dino Raja. I'll leave them as is or on their European contract. I'll probably start off the season with D. Brown uninjured, Brian Shaw uninjured. But I'll leave, Magic and Richard Dumas alone. Vinny Del Negro, I'll leave him alone since he was playing in Europe, etc. The other big thing I want to point out here is we went through and we were able to edit the draft class for every single player in here that is not in the game. Kevin Gamble went back, we got it. So it's kind of fun as you flip through rosters to go back and trying to think of off the top of my head some of these older guys that were in there. They were in the league a long time. There's guys drafted in the 4th round or 5th round of the 1982 draft that I forgot, until I started going through this, that the NBA even went back that long. Kiki Vandeweghe, he's already in the game, I think, on one of the legendary teams. James Donaldson is not. But he was drafted in the 4th round, 7th pick of the 1979 draft. Kind of cool. And thank you, D, because he made a phenomenal body for him, by the way. Very cool. So there is that little personal touch. The only thing we don't have for everybody at this point is we just don't have cyber faces for everybody. Not cyber faces, but portraits. So I think between portraits and then some polishing here and there, that's one of the big things we'd like to go through and have done to this. But anyway, other than that, we've got a really phenomenal roster. The last thing I'll point out here is if you go through, I don't have an answer for this, and we've talked for a couple people, but Shaq, for example, he shows up being ranked 142nd, and I had a brief explanation and just I think has to do with the use of how centers actually are in the game today versus way back when they were almost first pick for teams. It's like if I go through and simulate this season right now, Shaq doesn't even get picked up by anybody, even though he's the best player overall in this. So I don't have a rhyme or reason for that. If somebody's got insight on how we could fix that, would love to have your input. I noticed the same thing with the historical draft classes that 2K provides. The other thing we did fix in this, though, is if you've ever used one of these retro draft classes and pull them up in MyLeague, and then they go through, get drafted, they join your season, what I've noticed is the years pro, so like Shaq, for example, he defaults to a 3 years pro experience already, even during his rookie season. Well, that sucks. Now you got to go back and manually change all of that, right? Well, you don't anymore because we fixed that in our draft class. So Mick went through, edited, and made everybody that basically played in the NBA for a good season or two. You can flip down through here and kind of see all of those guys, which I think is just awesome. There's probably going to be a couple of guys sprinkled in here that didn't actually play in the NBA. You can go through and delete those out however you see fit. Anyway, for the most part, though, everybody else that's played in the league, they're in there someplace. You're just going to have to look for them. So that's a pretty cool touch. And the years pro will pull up correctly for them and default to 0 because that's just something we had to change in the cheat engine. It's like if you pull up any of these guys that are already in there in cheat engine, Shaq defaults to being a 3-year pro. Well, easy fix. We just changed it to 0. I think overall, that's the main thing. Just wanted to show you. You can go through here, see kind of some of the retro courts if you want. I'll pull a couple of those things up, and I may show a couple game clips at the beginning of this. But you can see right here, we don't have the modern day Celtics court, and we don't have that 1986 court. We have the work of Peaceman Knott, and we've got the Boston Garden, which I think is awesome. So all the courts are very retro in that regard. Yeah, so I'll let you guys log in, kind of play around with this, enjoy the roster, guys. It's phenomenal, plays very well. I think the other big thing to note in this is Mick went through and changed a lot of the tendencies for the players, so it plays a lot more like it did back in late 80s, early 90s. So a lot less run and gun, a lot more involvement in the post play, which I love. But anyway, I think that's everything. Hopefully you guys will enjoy, and let me know what feedback you have. We'd appreciate any of that. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the roster.